place. And the thing is, people in conversation can disagree about this, but it's a sense of feeling, can we go back there? Do you feel like you're welcome to come back and we can go, start again, try and figure out where we left off. And maybe, I can figure out, I need to work on how I responded there. And I want that to be the case. I want people to feel like, yes, Jack can be a pretentious asshole sometimes who says a bunch of crap that I don't agree with, but do I feel like I can go back and maybe begin to start a conversation at a different place? And I hope that people do get that sense. And I'm not saying I have it in exclusion to you as an atheist.
All right, Jack, on that note, I've left you with the final word. We appreciate your contribution. I'm going to move on because, as I say, I've got 40 minutes left and another 4, if not 5 callers to get through. But thank you very much.
Can I input something? I won't
yeah, whilst you do that, I'll just bring in the next caller. And can I just say to Prog Nemesis, I did have you lined up next, but for reasons which I now can't remember, I'm going to put you back one. So the next person on the call is going to be Moral Virus. Sorry, Almighty, do carry on.
Well, I won't retort per se to him because he can't come back on audio, but I give him the benefit of the doubt that he truly tries. And what he said, we all, if we get flustered or frustrated enough, we'll all take a hit to our civility. I do see that he puts the effort in being civil, but as far as being able to come back, I honestly don't see the point. As far as
I'll put it for you, and I know Jack isn't here, but he has an opportunity to come back and on a future occasion. I think that most people who I've talked to, their frustration with Jack is that you start off on what is a very civil and apparently meaningful conversation about beliefs. And then you start questioning about his belief, as we did when he was on the program. We asked him a question: well, what does separation from God mean? And he starts obfuscating at that point. He doesn't answer the question, and it becomes increasingly frustrated. And I'm guilty, as many other people have, at having lost my temper with him. But anyway, he isn't here, so let's move. Go on quickly, and then we'll move on to the next call.
I actually had a long and relatively civil conversation with Nephilim Free of all people, because somebody brought him in. They're like, hey, let's bring Nephilim Free into the call and see what happens. And I was like, I'm not in the mood for this. So he and I just started talking about computer games, and it was actually really nice. But then I got up to get a drink and came back, and someone brought up evolution, and he's just being as belligerent as possible. And I think the problem is that when, in conversations with people, like Jack, there's this inevitability of the first Jack leaving the room and then this other Jack who's completely entrenched and coming in, and it seems like it's going to end at the same place every time for no other reason that he's just so sensitive about the subject matter.
Yeah, well, as I say, he's not here to defend himself. And Concordance, I know you've had a point, but we've got many people to get through, and we've already got the next caller in the room. Welcome, Moral Virus.
Thank you.
You wanted to raise an issue, I think if I remember rightly, about inherent empathy. Have I got the right person?
You're right.
Okay, what would you like to say?
Okay, I think you're right that there's an innate empathy within us, but I think it's better to say that it's a potential empathy, and it's not going to come to fruition if, say, a baby is born into this world and then beaten as a child. And I've just noticed lately in the atheist community, I've heard a lot of discussions on morality, looking at it from a perspective of what genes we've inherited or kept by natural selection to keep us going. But I think there should be an emphasis put on nurture. Having seen Thunderbolts,
I think you've raised a very interesting point, and maybe Concordance or Owen may be able to help us on this. I mean, with genes, people normally associate them with physical characteristics. Have we identified an empathy gene? Does such a thing exist? Yeah. We have. Tell us about it.
It's mirror neurons. There you have motor neurons, and then you have mirror neurons, and the mirror of the motor neurons. And what they do, there's I can't remember his name, the guy that watched talk about this. But anyway, because obviously this is not my area of expertise, I'm trying to remember what little I got out of this. He was talking about experiments that were done where you have motor neurons that fire as you're going to act. And you're going to react to certain situations. And there are mirror neurons that inhibit these reactions when you're watching it happen in someone else and it's not actually happening to you. but you still get the firing of certain neurons as if it was happening to you. So in some sense, when you watch something occur to someone else, you literally are feeling it happening to you as if you're that person, and you have these other neurons that are inhibiting that are preventing you from feeling the actual pain or making the reaction to it. But he's found that this actually is correct. It's not a supernatural thing. We actually do. When we see somebody get punched in the gut, we actually do, crunch our abdominal muscles or what have you. When a child loses something and cries, we feel empathy for the loss in the same way. And they did verify that this sensation is measurable. It actually exists not only in our psychology but in our chemistry makeup.
Thanks for that, Aaron. I don't know whether Concordance wanted to add something, because I want another point that I want. Yeah.
Cognitive science calls it agency detection. So the ability not only to see that someone else has intentionality, but that their intentionality is associated with feelings that the observer also has. And you can't localize brain functions too much, because the brain is a distributed network. But there are certain regions that map out. Now, what you're talking about is the nurture element. We know that does play a role in human social norms. But the fact is, animals have empathy. And they have it without being taught or being part of a society. I think as low as maybe a mouse or a rat, they can see when they're cohorts, even if they're unrelated, they can hear the squeak of another mouse and react to that emotional state as though they themselves were receiving the pain or the fear or whatever. So it's our ability to recognize emotions in others that allows social animals to be cohesive. But there's also survival value for it. So that there is an evolutionary story behind it. It may not be the only driving force. There, of course, in human society is much more independent from the strict mechanistic biological effects. There are social norms as well that sometimes have to override our innate biological sense. And you have people that can suppress that empathy long enough to, for example, in war, to kill the enemy. But they have to be trained to do it. There has to be some development. There has to be some additional conditioning layered on top of the innate biological sense of empathy and agency detection.
Yes, you've raised an interesting question. I mean, the nature versus nurture argument is obviously one where, to a large degree, I think we'll never get to the bottom of it, because it's very difficult to have control tests on that. But the point that I was going to make about when you raised the issue of soldiers having to be trained to kill people, there is also in us I think, an inherent tribalism. We tend to identify ourselves with groups. Obviously, many thousands of years ago, it would be the whatever tribe we were in. Now, there's, you might be associating yourself with your local football team or America baseball team or whatever. There does seem to be a tribalistic element within us as well, doesn't there?
We also go through different stages as we grow too, because I remember when you talk about training to kill people, if you catch a man at the right age, his capacity for that kind of violence may be entirely different. I mean, I remember when I was in my 20s, I was much more capable of that than I am now. What I used to think were cool, I now think is repugnant. It's just natural aging process, I suppose.
Moreover, can I thank you very much for the call? I'm going to remove you for two reasons. We've got another 4 callers that I want to get in, 3 callers that I want to get in. We've only got 30 minutes left, and I've been informed by Tony that we are going to have, for a change, to actually end this show pretty much on time today. So let's move straight on. Prognosis, I apologise for taking you out of turn or putting you back in the line, but hopefully you will be with us now. Hello? Are you there? We're not hearing anything from you. Have you got your microphone muted? I've also got to get in my funny story about Eugenie Scott in the next 25 minutes.
For it right now.
Yeah.
Yes, whilst we're waiting for you, prognosers. Again, going back to the charity event, if you look above the video box on blog, you'll see there is a new banner which is advertising a charity event in aid of Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, which is taking place on the 17th and 18th of September. And we have got an awesome, absolutely awesome lineup of people from within YouTube and outside YouTube. The latest person to agree to appear on the show is Eugenie Scott, who is the head of the National Centre for Science Education in America. And I was speaking to her on Skype about her appearance on the show and what we were going to do. And the conversation moved and shifted over a number of issues, one of which was the prognosis. If you could just mute your microphone for now, and we'll come back to you in a second. Don't ruin my punchline. So one of the things we were talking about is her latest visit to the Grand Canyon. And I jokingly said, well, did you not appreciate that obviously the Grand Canyon was formed in 5 minutes after the flood? And we got talking about the flood waters and the ideas in relation to that. And we moved on to the hydroplate theory. And before I knew what I'd said, I referred to the lunar bukkake hypothesis. And Eugenie Scott said to me, I've not heard of that. What does bukkake mean? At which point I realised I put myself in a difficult position because I was talking to the head of the NCSE, having to explain to her what bukkake was. But fortunately, a few moments prior to that in the conversation, she had actually mentioned that none other than Thunderfoot was in a room just down the corridor from her. He was visiting their organisation that day. So I came up with this cunning idea. I said, oh, well, Eugenie, I'm really pressed for time now. Ask Thunderfoot about it. I know he's done videos on it. So poor Thunder was going to be met with Eugenie Scott saying, now, Thunderfoot, explain what lunar bukkake is. Anyway, that was my funny story for the day. Prognosis, are you with us now?
Well, yeah, the question I had is sort of been around in the chat already. And it's, what's the best way to confront theists on, well, their arguments? Because some are just pure nonsense, like Bill O'Reilly and his waves goes in, waves goes out crap. And without actually scaring them away or stop the conversation with the theists. Because, like Shock of God, when you just mention something he does just really disagree with, he just blocks you. And yeah, we have seen how it can go with to get up a piece in the conversation. Well, when it gets a little bit difficult about something. But I see Concordance wants to address this.
Yeah, let me give you my short answer, which is ask a lot of questions. You'd be surprised at how many people hold beliefs because they've never thought about them very deeply. You know, a lot of people will say, yeah, I think the arc, well, okay, well, that's a good point. And that's, I think, where people like Non-Stamp Collector do a really good job because they bypass the initial reaction, right? He uses an analogy or a parable in order to get past the initial I'm a Christian and I don't want my beliefs challenged, or I'm a Muslim and we believe certain things. And you ask people, why do you believe that? Well, it says in the Quran. So you believe it because it says in the Quran. Where does it say it? What specifically does it say? Is there any other way you could interpret that? And by asking the questions rather than sort of being, I think, strictly confrontational, you believe it because your invisible friend in the sky believes that, you might actually keep the dialogue going long enough for the person to start actually questioning themselves. Start to see, I arrived at this conclusion, but I never really took the steps in between.
Yeah, I agree with that to somewhat, because in my neighborhood where I live, we have a lot of those Christians that come at the door. Can come up with the name. Jehovah's Witnesses.
Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I sometimes just have a chat with them because it's fun, and I keep them off the street. so to say. And well, last time I had one in that went on about like killing is wrong because of war and this is that. And then I asked him a question, sure, you're vegan? And he was like, what? He was like, yeah, you're killing an animal for meat, so that's wrong, so you must be a vegan, right? And it really stumped him.
Perfect. Yeah. A good example too.
Yeah, that's the other problem is a lot of these people are trained to believe in very black and white concepts, and very rarely does anything fit in the extremes of black or white or good or evil or good or everything is. I have to explain that things are not even in a gray area. That it's because of extenuating circumstances, it would be more appropriate to say that it is a spectrum of color, and that all white and all black are virtually impossible, and everything sits somewhere in this huge middle arena. And of course, that's difficult for a lot of people to think about. That because how do you make your judgments then? They have to know. Simple yes or no answers. I mean, a lot of these people, the religion is very binary for them.
The thing is, if that Jehovah's Witness couldn't retort to that, they must not have known their Bible well at all. There's verses that could easily be construed to say, well, here's animal sacrifice, and here's where it says, go forth, and these animals are safe for you to eat, and these others aren't. So there's plenty of verses from the Bible that support the eating of animals and would justify it, or justify their killing, even just to pour out their blood and burn their fat. So the thing is, a lot of these people, they don't even know what it is that they're supposed to believe. They just haven't barely cracked the spine on that book.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? I mean, most atheists have read the Bible better than theists have. Concordance.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Is I think the more people read and think, and I don't think your goal should be to convert people ever. I don't think you should even attempt to tell someone what to believe. I think you should get them into a position where they do their own questioning, where they're prepared to go on and say, maybe I'm more of a deist. Maybe I think about this. I think there's still a God, but why do I think there's a God? What kind of process can you set in motion? And for some people, it doesn't matter, and they'll basically end the conversation. And it's unproductive to waste your time on those people.
Okay, here's a good
if they're
example. I'm sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
Go.
All right. Now, on the last video where Board of Education, the first guy things that he had taken from Icons of Evolution, that was obviously his only choice of references with Jonathan Wells, and he knew nothing else about what the subject was talking about. But he couldn't be specific about anything. He said, well, there are certain proteins that would imply one sort of relationship, and another one implies another sort of relationship, and neither one of them supports the fossil record. Okay, what ones? What are they supposed to have indicated, and why? Give me the examples, show me what they are, and I'm certain that if it was me interviewing that man, that he would have absolutely no idea what he was talking about, and I mean completely no idea what he was talking about. That he doesn't know, if he thinks, he's not even in the ballpark for understanding even the terms that he's using. And if I were to get him to explain each one of these things, okay, which is the example, and how do you say that it does not support, or what have you, the best I could get is a logical fallacy if he had an idea. But what I would really get is vague excuses for why he just filled out a whole bunch of stuff he had no idea what he was talking about. Okay, done. Somebody else.
There's this one Simpsons where they've installed this doorbell, and it's a novelty doorbell, and they're just waiting for anyone to ring it, and through various, events, nobody actually makes it to the door, and at one point these Jehovah's Witnesses are on their way up the walkway, and Marge is sitting there saying, okay, here we go, and as he has his finger right in front of the button, he says, maybe what we're doing isn't so great. Maybe we should just stop trying to push our beliefs on other people, and then they turn around and walk the other way. Now, it's obviously absurd to think of any religious group rationalizing that way. Of course, they take for granted that they must spread their message if it's a proselytizing-based religion. I think that atheists are practically the only group that manages to talk themselves out of spreading their own message. If you were talking about any other religion, any other societal issue, any other political point of view, someone will prosecute their case to the best of their ability. It seems that we're the only ones who say, why don't we just back off and leave everyone else alone? You know, vegetarians don't do that. People of various political beliefs. Nobody does that except us.
Because we're not a religion. That's the whole point.
But it's a point of view. I'm not talking about just religion. I'm talking about any point of view. If someone likes a movie or a certain style of art, they will do everything they can to promote their opinion and make sure people are exposed to their opinion and try to get people to change their mind if possible. And they never say, maybe I should just let everyone else be. That really doesn't occur to anybody.
I understood what you were saying.
Yeah,
I think it's a slippery slope to proselytizing, to becoming something of a, not even an activist, but really just sort of a jerk. Depending on how you interact with people, if someone walks up to you and starts proselytizing, maybe you're not a good example, but most people get very uncomfortable when someone else is pushing something on them. And it instantly puts up your defenses. That's why I say, if you're talking about confronting maybe a relative or a friend who you think is going down the wrong path, I don't think confrontation's the right approach. And I think you need to figure out where you have a common viewpoint.
Yeah, but I'm not focused on the act of confrontation or the degree of confrontational tone. I'm talking about the fact that we seem to be the only group that actively talks ourselves out of selling what we're selling, if we're selling anything.
Because we're the good guys.
Can I just go back to concordance? Because when you're advocating accommodation as opposed to confrontation, your end goal is in fact the same, though, isn't it?
Which is what?
To effectively persuade them to think and for themselves and to come to the realization that belief in God is a nonsense.
No. I want them to be able to think clearly, think rationally, think logically, but I don't care where they end up. I really don't. I don't care what people's personal beliefs are in the end, so long as they get there by some rational basis. Now, if they are fundamentalists, then I feel that I should address their fundamentalism. And if someone is a denialist, I feel I should address their denialism. But I don't let that become the focus of the conversation. I would much rather address the flaws in their thinking and their logic and their reason than in the conclusions that they've come to, especially if they're very deeply held personal beliefs. And it's a very fine balance, because there are some things that are harmful, but you address the behaviors and the thinking and not necessarily the parts of the person that they've adopted. I am a Christian. Don't attack Christianity. Well, you do actually attack Christianity to some extent, but you can have a Christian who can think clearly about maybe everything but that one particular issue, right? And that's why I keep coming back to people like Francis Collins, who has taken so much flack from atheists, and I think undeservedly so. He may be an evangelical Christian, but he's also a tireless proponent of science and an enemy of science denialism and evolution denialism. And I think he's sort of on our side, even if we disagree on the topic of religion.
Okay, concordance, I accept that. Point well made, but we've now got 12 minutes left and we've got two callers that I am very keen to fit in, and we do have to finish on time. So, Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. I wanted to say a couple more things about the attacks in Norway. I don't know if you saw the massive irony that some jihadist group claimed responsibility a couple of hours afterwards for saying that Norway was hostile to Islam, and it turns out the actual guy who did it was because they were too friendly to Islam.
Can I say that really quick? The first thing, when I found out it was some Christian fundamentalist, the first thing, and I don't know whether to laugh or cry over this, the first thing that crossed my mind is, I really hope no Muslims got hurt.
Yeah. The question I wanted to ask is how, whether or not we want to accommodate or confront religion in general, what do you think the best way is to convince people not of necessarily atheism but secularism? I mean, people like, if this was a Muslim terrorist, people like Michelle Buckman and all those people with that petition would be saying, the solution isn't separation of church and state, it's more of my religion. How do you think the best way is to put forward secularism?
From my perspective, I mean, it's a little frustrating living in a southern state as I do, where everyone has like the cross on, and they're all, you have a blessed day, and they force their beliefs on you continuously. I mean, I would probably be reprimanded by Human Relations if I were to walk into my office wearing a shirt that said atheist on it, because that would be considered offensive. Anybody else can come in and put a label on there, exactly what their religious belief is, Lutheran, Catholic, whatever. I don't think I could really get away with that. But then neither do I really try, because I'm not trying to cause confrontation. A lot of these other people clearly are. And the more power you give them, the more power they want, until they have control over the state and the law, and then it's an automatic violation of human rights. And the only way to keep them in check is with secularism. I don't want to push atheism on anybody, but I will push secularism on people. Because I'm not turning over anything to God. I'm not allowing for example, our governor to get away with saying, after he caused all these problems, to say, oh, these problems are too big for Texas to handle, for government to handle, so we're going to turn it over to God. No, I'm going to make huge protests about that sort of thing. Anyway, I'll let you go. Next person.
Well, I think this is just another example of why it's so difficult to live and let live with religious beliefs, is because they take for granted the positive qualities as they see it of their religion. They take the truth of their religion for granted, even if they've never examined it. And you'll have a lot of people who, to talk to them, you wouldn't think at all that they were militant or active in their religious beliefs. You wouldn't think that they were very aggressive, but they will give concrete support to people who will push an agenda against secularism in favor of seizing control of government apparatus for the sake of their religion. And it's just, they do it almost without trying. You understand? I mean, obviously there's some very cynical people at the core of these hybrid political and religious movements, but there are a lot of people fueling their furnaces who really, they're not these ambitious or vicious or aggressive people. It's just, they will continue to be used as fodder until the group identity and the irrational beliefs that connect the leaders and the followers of this movement is finally severed.
Yes, now I can look at the few people that I know who are friends of mine, who are Christian, who are admirable people, and who I enjoy their company, and I respect them deeply. I don't credit their religion to any degree with anything good that they have going on. I suspect that these people are they're good people anyway. And because our culture has linked the words good with Christian, then naturally good people who want to be seen that way will, of course, associate themselves with the word Christian. I don't. When you see extremism and when you see violence and bigotry and so much that goes on in the news, especially here in Texas, a lot of people outside Texas may not know what I'm talking about, but when you see a lot of the domestic violence that's all religious based down here, I do credit the religious belief with being a source for that, because it either fuels the fire of what they already believe, because it really does teach that they should go on gut instincts and they should be reactionary to some degree, and it also fuels their prejudice. I blame the religion for causing the evil in their lives more likely than just that they were evil people, and it does appear that if they're good people because they were already, and religion had nothing to do with that. So I find no benefit to religious beliefs at all.
I mean, it reminds me of a lecture given by Richard Dawkins, in which he talks about the cherry picking of the Bible, in which they take out the good bits. And the point that he was making is, if they've got the ability to take out the good bits from the Bible, then they're using criteria to assess what are the good bits, which of itself does not come from the Bible, which means that they have this innate capacity to see what is right and wrong without reliance on the Bible. Concordance.
I suspect that there are a lot of religious people who are also proponents of secularism. And those are the ones I think we need as allies, because there aren't enough atheists in the world to enforce secularism. And so you get religious Supreme Court justices who are champions of the independence of state and religion. So I'm a big proponent of secularism. That's not a personal belief. That is a political position.
Yeah, I have to add to that.
It's so important.
I have to add to that too. When I went to the Board of Education hearing, not only was I in the company of Christians on the Texas Freedom Network who were already advocates of secularism, even though they are also ordained ministers in some cases. Okay, then we're talking about Christians working with atheists in the same organization, and that organization is dedicated to secularization. And then we had many of the advocates who were speaking on behalf of science also declared themselves to be religious believers of whatever denomination, and that they make the distinction between what they believe and based on faith and the science that is based on evidence, and they were very clear about that. And the votes that came in from the testimony from these people was critical, because we needed to have people to say, look, I am a religious believer and this is science and there's no problem with it. And people tell me that Ken Miller is like the only guy out there, and no, he's not. Most scientists, especially here in Texas, most scientists do hold religious beliefs, and they're able to distinguish them so that they can still be functional scientists.
Jonathan, I'm going to have to remove you. Thank you very much for the call. The reason being that I've got one last person I want to fit in, and we've got about under 5 minutes to go. So I'm sorry for Jesus Christ. It's going to have to be a very brief call, but you're always welcome to come back. And I'm sorry to those people who wanted to appear, but we didn't have time to get to you. For Jesus Christ, can you be as quick as possible, please?
Sure. Thanks for adding me. Well, I don't think you can really call it a question, but my understanding is that the topic of the show was accommodate or confront. And I'd like to pose at least a hypothetical scenario where it's not only prudent to accommodate, but obligatory. And this would be any scenario in which the views of an atheist or a Christian, or generally the views of society, run congruently to one another in view of a greater threat. For example, a war. A war would be a great example of that. In such instances, I think it's very important to tone down the degree of animosity between atheists and Christians to a degree that would make, it would provide a certain degree of functionality between atheists and Christians. I think it's also very important that we keep this aspect more broadly in mind, so that the rift does not grow too large between the two groups. Another factor is, eventually, it may not seem plausible at this point, especially not to you in the USA, but eventually it's possible that we could live in a world where atheists constitute the majority of people. And in such a world, I think due diligence must be given so that the views of what in that case would then be a Christian minority are not repressed.
Yeah, I hope for that.
Thank you very much for that.
I wouldn't...
Yeah, thank you for that. I've had to remove you because we've only got 2 minutes to go. Aaron.
No, I'm done. I didn't want to take up anybody's time.
Okay, did anyone want to comment on what he's saying? I don't think you're going to have too much disagreement. And why you came in under a different name is I've no idea. Did anyone want to comment on that?
Real quick.
Sure.
We all, I think, atheist or theist, we all probably have close relatives or friends or brothers or sisters, whatever, that are theists. So we all have to exercise our tolerance at some point or another, even if it's just around the Thanksgiving table. So I think we've all learned the skills necessary to treat people as individual human beings and not as some aggregate group. And I think we need to even exercise those skills on the internet and on YouTube and in our dialogues with people in our daily lives. We need to maintain that same level of basic human respect, between the same respect you would give your mother who believed in ghosts or fairies or leprechauns. That same basic level of respect.
Yeah, I think that really this whole subject can be divided into two separate categories. One is a matter of how confrontational your tone is when you have any kind of an exchange with someone with religious beliefs. And I have no problem with that. I have no problem with toning it down, keeping a lid on the sarcasm and things like this. The problem is that we have a subset of people who, while they agree with our point of view on the theistic and atheistic thing, and agree in principle on many issues of the theistic religions, they will actually stand up and say, well, do we really have to do this? Do we really have to make our case at all? And that is just incredible to me. Those people I don't think have a leg to stand on. You know, if you believe that you're either correct or you believe that there's positive aspects of your point of view, I think that, like the people who proselytize for their religion, there is a kind of obligation. You know, if you eat at a restaurant and it's good, I feel obligated to tell people about it. And the idea, it seems, as I said before, we are practically the only group that has a subset that tries to actively talk us out of sharing our point of view with other people. You know, you never had, some people were talking about Billy Mays in the chat section earlier. You never had Billy Mays get up there and say, okay, well, here's this great thing and it slices and dices, but, you know, I understand you probably have a lot of junk in your kitchen already. It's okay if you don't want this. It's just, you know, you make the sales pitch and people either buy it or they don't.
Okay, on that note, can I thank everyone that's contributed, Concordance, RNR, Almighty Athismo, everyone that's called in and everyone that's come along to watch it. I'm going to spend the last 30 seconds or so pimping the charity event once again. Above the video box, you'll see there is a banner. I've also, above the chat, I've put a link into the website that we're using to keep people informed as to who's going to be on the show, and it's got various other pages. So if you click on that, have a look at that, go to the banner, you can go to the donation pages, you can also go to the schedule, and I have the schedule up in front of me at the moment. I think we're out of time, so I won't go through it, but I can assure you it's a very, very awesome lineup, and please check it out. Please link to the website, have a look at that, and hopefully we'll see you on the 17th and 18th. But for now, we're out, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Thank you very, very much, and thank you to Tony.